Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod here at the quick turnaround. Just like Michigan State has to prepare for the marquee game, the Fort Myers Tipoff Classic against North Carolina. A reminder that if you don't follow us on YouTube or X, please do so now. Also, if you're in a podcast player, leave a 5-star written review so that more Spartan fans can find our show. If you're on YouTube or X, please leave comments when you're watching us live. And do please join us live after the game where we'll discuss North Carolina showdown and digest our turkey. Also, head over to nudgeprinting.com/win to find our live poll on who you think was the Michigan State player of the game. That will be open from now, although of course there's no game. But until after the game when we start the show, so sometime during the live stream, just kind of fun to kind of interact with us a little bit. All right, Ryan, let's talk about North Carolina, the upcoming game against the bluest of the blue bloods, North Carolina and Fort Myers. Both teams are 6-0. Looking very good. Michigan State has played now. This will be the third non-conference season in a row, or third season in a row that Michigan State's played North Carolina. Last year, of course, they won in the Maui Invitational in overtime. Year before that, lost in the second round of the NCAA tournament. Yep. Coached by Hubie Brown, who's former great of North Carolina.
Hubert Davis. Hubert Davis.
I did that last year too.
Hubie Brown is a lot older. A great coach.
Hubie Davis, who has been, he's not been like a great guard where he's sort of like, you're always kind of wondering what's going on with him, but more so because I think he has more pressure than a great guard does at Wisconsin.
Way more.
Yeah.
Way more.
They'd expect more, obviously, at North Carolina. They had long extended success there, but they've had their stinkers of coaches in between, great ones. And so it has their fan base.
Matt Doherty.
Matt Doherty, okay. But it was a bad experience for a couple of years, and it left a bad taste in their mouth, and made them hesitant to have guys who are not successful. And Davis has been a guy who's been sort of successful and then kind of not. It's kind of hard how to classify him. So anyway, they've been okay with him. They've had some good years and some not so good years.
Well,
this year,
let's
go ahead. Talk about that first.
Yeah. So it has been an up and down ride for Hubert Davis. So his first year, they were frankly bad until they managed to scrape into the tournament and then went all of a sudden, discovered some shooting and took it all the way to the title game where they lost to Kansas.
Right.
So that sort of erased. Now keep in mind, as you say, this is a high pressure job. I would say no place is as insane as Kentucky, but Carolina would be right next in line along with Kansas.
Yeah, right.
They expect to win, and frankly, they have every right to, because that's all they've done for 70 years, 80 years. It goes back to Frank McGuire and then Dean Smith for forever. Bill Guthridge, his longtime assistant, took over briefly and kept the train rolling. Then came Matt Doherty, who had success at Notre Dame, was a North Carolina great. He was a teammate of Michael Jordan, James Worthy, those guys. Had a lot of hype around him and actually recruited really well.
Yeah.
But couldn't win. Missed the tournament, I think, at least once, but it was his recruits largely that were the core of that team that won the title in 2005. So he wasn't a complete disaster. He just couldn't get those guys to play at the level he needed them to early enough to keep his job. Roy Williams obviously came in, left Kansas to return to the place he'd been a long-time assistant and had a great run. I mean, nobody can deny that. What he win?
Yeah.
Three national titles. Yeah. Impressive, obviously. It's funny because nobody will ever supplant Dean Smith in the minds of Carolina fans, I wouldn't think, but you can make an argument that Roy Williams might have had a better run. He won more
not
titles.
Quite as long, probably.
He won more titles. I know that
in
a shorter duration of time. Dean Smith was just ultra consistent. I forget what their record was. It was something like, I don't know, somewhere in the high teens years in a row where they at least made the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
Some crazy
you could pencil them in every year.
Like that. Yeah. They were so good for so long. But anyway, that's the background that Hubert Davis, also a former Carolina player, also a former assistant under Roy Williams. If you remember, he left the broadcasting booth to join the staff, and he eventually became the guy who succeeded Roy. Roy handpicked him to be the guy, but he came in with a lot of skepticism. And the way that first year went right up until the NCAA tournament was rough. They were not happy in Chapel Hill. And then he makes a run to the title game. So everybody figures, okay, maybe he's figured it out now. Year 2, they don't make the tournament at all. So the pitchforks are out. Year 3, and we saw that because Michigan State played and lost to them in the second round of the NCAA tournament. They got to the Sweet 16 after a very strong regular season. I think they were the 1 seed that year. So that would be an okay year, but probably at least mildly disappointing that to get to the Sweet 16 when you're a 1 seed, you figure you'd at least go to the Elite 8 and you would think Final Four.
Sure.
Didn't work out. And then last season, we saw them in Maui, as you said, beat them in overtime. It was a weird team, like totally guard-centric, no size at all, which is not Carolina historically. They managed to scrape into the tournament where they won a game and then lost in round 2. I believe against Ole Miss, if I remember correctly. I think they were in Michigan State's region.
I think so, yeah.
So, inconsistent, right? But not great. On the positive side, you would say, well, he's made a title game and he had a 1 seed in 2 of his 4 seasons. But then the other 2, he doesn't get in at all. He barely gets in, wins a game, loses in the second round. A lot of places that track record would be celebrated. It's not celebrated in Chapel Hill. So I think that the heat is definitely on because that's not a play. I mean, they fired Doherty. I think it was 3 years quick, and that was an era
before the portal. Yeah.
Before it really got quick trigger time, nationally. So Carolina's not going to put up with a long run of being an afterthought. And honestly, during a fair amount of Hubert Davis's tenure, afterthought is way too strong, but it hasn't felt the way it traditionally has during my lifetime.
Right. I'd say you could say they're not part of the conversation usually year to year.
Not
like
the
you don't
way
think about what's North Carolina doing, not like Duke is or
not
Kentucky
the way that they historically have been the last few years. Because again, the title game run was a fluke. I mean, that was not a team and nobody saw that coming. Yeah. So really, of his 4 seasons, only in 1 were they in that conversation where people were talking about them as a serious Final Four threat, and that's just not North Carolina like. I would say that although they bounced back a little bit, at least with regard to one kid we're going to talk about a lot in recruiting, I would say recruiting has not been where historically you expect it to be for North Carolina. Because, look, North Carolina, again, in my lifetime, right there with anybody. They were not quite the one-and-done force that Kentucky and Duke were during that era, but still doing very well, high talent level always. They under Davis, they're one of those programs that's leaned on the portal a lot. And I just wonder, I haven't delved too deeply into it, but I have to wonder how the fan base feels about that, because it would strike me that North Carolina fans probably feel much the way we would if Michigan State was going that route after years. North Carolina is one of the only programs. I mean, I would say it probably begins and ends with North Carolina and Duke. They're the only programs that I think historically have had a structure similar to Michigan State's in terms of heavy alumni involvement. Guys coming back for games and during the off season and staying in touch, all of that. They're one of the only 2 programs that I think can really compete with MSU on that front. So when you think about it that way, I think, boy, I just got to wonder how their fans feel about being so portal centric, because they haven't been as bad as some programs, but you look at this team, 1, 2, 3, 3 of the 5 starters are portal guys this year. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot for a program that I think of in a certain way, at least, like Carolina. So all of that is to lay it out that things are kind of, the heat's turned up a little bit. I'm not sure if it's boiling, but the heat's turned up with Hubert Davis. I think if he's going to go this route, I think he's got to deliver results.
Well, and you'd expect results a little faster at the portal. I mean, that's kind of like right. We've seen teams sort of like add water and suddenly they're competitive if you do it right and are able to coach that way.
They would, the first year, the year he got to the title game, he did have some important portal guys. Mm-hmm. And that team that went to there was a 1 seed, was mostly homegrown, if I remember correctly. They may have had a couple of portal guys that were solidly in the rotation, but that was a heavy homegrown team. This team, though, man, there's just no question. There's some newcomers, some freshmen, or Euro guys who were 29, but who were in their first year of college ball. But it is not really the traditional Carolina homegrown team that we're used to seeing. So I think he's got to win. Now, the good news is I think he's probably going to win. I think they look much better to me than last season overall. And this is going to be a very stiff test for MSU. I saw their game against, I saw a little bit of their game against Kansas, which they won. And then the whole game against St. Bonaventure today. And it's a good team. I do think it's a team Michigan State can handle, but they're going to provide a very stiff test.
Yeah. Well, let's go and dive into the numbers just a little bit. So you kind of talked about the portal additions, but from the numbers, number 36 in offense, they're number 19th on defense. By comparison, Michigan State is 50th on offense, which I think is largely a reflection of their poor 3-point shooting, although that has gotten some better. And they're 8th, and Michigan State's 8th on defense. North Carolina's top 60 on both offensive and defensive rebounding. They're very good from 2. They're top 60, and they get to the line a lot. They're number 50, or the top 50, I should say. They're not great shooting free throws. They're a little better than Michigan State. They're shooting 72%. And they are, this is like the old Spider-Man meme where both, point at each other. And these are 2 teams that play transition about the only way that they in the country, and where they push really hard. And so although they're top 40 in average length of offensive possession, which is much faster than Michigan State. Michigan State, we talked about maybe 1 or 2 shows ago, that although they run, if they don't have something, they tend to slow down and kind of try and get something, a good shot. On defense, they're number 1 against the 2s. They've given up some decent looks from 3, and don't create a lot of turnovers, or sub 300 in defensive turnover rate. They're 74th in block rate, which is pretty good, but Michigan State's 20th, which is a little surprising. Michigan State's not usually that high. And especially given their size, you'd expect them to be a little better with the blocks. But anyway, they are, like you said, they'll be a stiff test. They're definitely like 20 steps up from East Carolina. So a better directional school from Carolina here.
Yeah. What I would say, start with the defense. It almost makes that 2-point defense even more impressive, because normally when you see a 2-point defense that's number 1 in the country, you kind of intuitively expect that to go along with a high block rate. And they're solid, but they're not where Michigan State is. Michigan State's near elite at 20. But they're still doing it, which tells you that they might not be blocking it as many shots as some other programs, but they're altering a lot of shots. In fact, they talked about on the broadcast today that was the case. They were surprised when they looked at the stats, like, they don't have a lot of blocks, but they've altered like double-digit shots by St. Bonaventure. And I think that's true. One thing, we talked about Michigan State being intentional about adding some size on the perimeter in the portal. Well, Carolina's added it pretty much everywhere. They've gone from being a team that had virtually no size to a team that has a ton of it. They're going to start 2 6'10" guys and a 7-footer. So, and one of the 3 reserves that gets legit minutes is also 6'10". And they have another 6'10" guy that really I don't think will play in this game. So they got a lot of, and then there's another one who's a Euro transfer who, again, is not playing regularly for them, but I expect could play if necessary, and that adds even more team size. It's something else. They've gone polar opposite. Last season's team, if you remember, R.J. Davis, Elliot Cadeau, Seth Trimble, it was guard-centric. Yeah. That's how they were built. This team, especially now, it's worth mentioning, we haven't said it so far, Seth Trimble, who's their veteran guard, played against MSU each of the last 2 years, from Wisconsin, very good athlete, has become over time a pretty good all-around guard. I think he was averaging 15 a game. I think it was a practice incident, broke his arm. So he's out until late December. So Michigan State's not going to see him, especially with him out. Everything's going to run offensively through the forecourt. Like this is a front court centric team that's huge, total opposite of what they were a year ago.
It's funny because, there's that story of Izzo at the NCAA tournament watching North Carolina walk by. And I don't know if he was talking to someone, be like some of the beat reporters or someone, and saying, boy, we're really small, or I'm really small, or something like that.
Are you talking about 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Yeah. And remember, that was a huge, that team had Baycott.
Right, exactly.
In the middle, who was massive.
And I think he's like, I think what he says, I need to get bigger, is what he said. Yeah. And I think one of the reporters is like, well, Tom, you're kind of done growing. Not realizing he was referring to his team that needed to get bigger, because he just saw the North Carolina team walk by and just realized, wow, we are physically too small. And then, of course, the next year, Michigan State added some size, certainly with Sapala at 7 foot. And then North Carolina went the opposite way, right? Like you mentioned. And now they've gone back. It's like a pendulum, trying to keep track of them, I suppose.
Yep.
So do you want to talk about their offense a little bit? Because I know we talked about the defensively, they're really good. And yet, despite not different blocks.
Again, as befitting a team with that size, they're pretty good from 2. They're not a lot better than Michigan State from 3, slightly better, but sub 100 from 3. So, and not a huge volume team. One thing they do very well, they draw a lot of fouls, which again, not surprising with that much size and an orientation to getting the ball into the paint, right?
Yep, locking it up inside.
They've been solid from the line, not great, 72%. Michigan State's at 70. So they're doing an acceptable job taking advantage of it. Maybe not as good as Hubert Davis would like to see, though. I'm sure he would like to see them more in the mid to high 70s, but be that as it may, that's where they're at. So, they're not hemorrhaging turnovers, but they're not great there. They're sub 100, as is Michigan State.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is a team that is, as we talked about, wants to play fast. The big difference between Michigan State and North Carolina, as you said, when North Carolina is stopped in transition and they get into the half court, they still want to play fast. Yeah. Whereas Michigan State, when they get turned away, they're going to be a little bit more deliberate in terms of looking to get the best possible shot. Carolina wants to keep the tempo going a little higher.
Yeah.
A little faster. So that's what we'll see. But overall, solid offensive team. Both teams are solid offensively, I would say, rather than great. But Carolina is really good defensively. Michigan State is even better statistically. One other thing worth mentioning, and we're going to get back to this when we talk about the keys. Carolina's top 60 in both offensive and defensive rebounding, but outside the top 50. So they're in the 50s, both ends. That's good. Good, decent.
Right.
Not Michigan State. Michigan State significantly better statistically at both ends. Carolina, traditionally, when they're good, as you would expect from a team that wants to run, they traditionally are a very good rebounding team.
Yeah. Which is important. You got to get the ball in order to outlet to start the break.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
The defensive rebounding for sure. But again, Carolina will also run off makes the same way Michigan State does. So It'll be a very interesting game. Each team has some edges and strengths versus the other. Stylistically, I would say there are some differences, but at their core, I think the programs are more similar than they are different in terms of the things they emphasize. They want to run, they want to rebound, they want to be physical. They've got size and they'll use it. So, not too different than what Michigan State wants to do in the basic ways we talk about.
All right, that brings us to the opposing lineup brought to you by the Brothers Just Two Gutters. Friends, it's time to make sure your gutters are taken care of before the winter starts. Snow is coming in a couple days here. I think on Thanksgiving, we're going to get our first snowfall. Well, not first, but first major snowfall here in West Michigan. I'm not sure what it's like over on your side of the state.
What are you guys scheduled to get? Do you know?
A couple inches, but I know up
That's
north, it's going to be like 10 inches. So it's like some serious.
They're talking. I've seen anything from 4 to 6 here.
Oh, so you're going to
between Saturday and Sunday.
Well, and I'll tell you, to be honest, and I'm sure we'll have some North Carolina fans watching it like, oh my God, I'm so glad I don't live there. But what really gets us is the lake effect snow that just, you have the warm air moving over the cold, or the cold air moving over the warm water, and you just get these bands like sunny, and then you get an inch of snow, and then sunny, an inch of snow. Mm-hmm. And that can happen anytime. And that's like we'll expect to get, 2 inches and we end up with 8 or, so it's just totally random. And so that's that's risk. What could certainly happen. So anyway, make sure you take care of your gutters. I know they're not sexy and not exciting, and that's why you let the Brothers Suggest Your Gutters take care of them. You get 10% off your order if you just mention Final Four when you get your estimate, either from Greg or Kurt, whether you're on the east or the west side of the state. They will take care of things. They'll clean them out. They'll fix them if they're leaky or whatever it is, whether it's your home or your business. Make sure they're functioning properly before the winter comes. Get them out there doing this right now. They'll get on the ladders and clean everything out, fix it up so you don't have to. And last thing, it's bad enough falling off ladders, but don't get on slippery ladders. It's the worst. So make sure those guys are doing it for you. So go to the support page at tffinots.com/support to find ways to get get the estimates from Greg and Kurt. And obviously they sponsor the play that Michigan State needs to keep in the gutter, which Rod will give us as soon as we're done going through the starters here. We'll begin with Kyan Evans, 6'2" junior transfer. As you mentioned, here's the first of our transfers. He's a point guard from Colorado State, averaging 8.5 points a game on 48, 36, and 67 shooting. And he's a little less than 5 assists per game with about a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio.
Yeah. Good player. And an important one, because if you remember, this team last year had essentially 2 point guards. They had Elliot Cadeau, who's now with old Dusty's boys, and RJ Davis, who was really kind of everything for that team last year. He had to be. Mm-hmm. But both those guys are gone. Davis was out of eligibility and Cadeau left. I gather
mutual
not the departure Carolina fans were crying about. Yeah. And for what we've seen of him so far in a Michigan uniform, I kind of get it. It's not that he can't play at all, but he'd be a very frustrating guy to have running your team. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I was just going to say, if you're a North Carolina fan watching, please leave a comment. I'm curious what your thoughts are on Davis's coach, but also what your thoughts are on Cadeau. Just leave a comments below. I'd be curious to see what you guys think. Go ahead.
Yeah. So they needed somebody. They needed somebody to come in and run the show. And this is one of those portal additions that I was mentioning. And Evans has done a solid job. They're not asking, as I said, especially with Trimble out, this is front court in terms of their scoring emphasis. And so he's only averaging 8.5 points a game. He's not taking a ton of shots. That's not his role. His role is to stick a shot occasionally, which he's shooting reasonably well, but more to run their offense. And, when you're right, he's 1 assist shy of averaging, I think 5 per game, I believe. He's being dynamic enough, I guess is my point. The other thing is, when he goes out, from what I see, they got a little bit of a problem. He was foul prone today against St. Bonaventure. So they need him. And And I would say, although I don't have this on our keys, it's just occurring to me now as we're talking. We know that a guy that wears number 1 in green and white has a bit of a knack for drawing fouls. So
Yes.
if I were Carolina, if I were Hubert Davis, I would be telling Mr. Evans, be careful.
Yeah.
Because again, he showed that propensity today, at least. And he's going up against one of the great foul baiters in the country. So we'll keep an eye on that one. But overall, he's a solid and necessary guy at that position.
Next we have, and if you have more than a couple transfer in your team, you're bound to have someone for the Baltics. And so we have Luka Bogovic, 6'6" junior from Montenegro, first year college basketball.
Right.
He's averaging 12.2 points a game, shooting 39, 34, and 75 with an almost 4-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, averaging about 3 assists a game.
Yeah, good secondary playmaker. He's giving them some scoring punch, which is needed. It's funny, when I was watching him, I kind of felt like he was more creative than the Dixon kid we'll talk about, who actually seems to be the backup point guard. He had some nice passes in this game today. But in any event, he's been solid. He's shooting the ball decently, good size at 6'6". And obviously he's not a kid. He has ample professional experience in Montenegro. So yeah, why didn't he end up in Champaign, I guess, is the only question.
He ran out of roster spots.
Maybe so.
Well, they're not the only ones with Euros. We've seen it.
That's
so many
true.
From
they're all over.
Is there anyone left in their league? I mean, there can't be anyone left at this point. They just
listen. I mean, it's not a surprise. I mean, when this pathway opened up, when it became possible for guys with European professional experience to still have collegiate eligibility, I mean, that area of the world, let's call it the former Yugoslavia, which incorporates Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, and Montenegro.
Bosnia
has been arguably, outside of the United States, the best talent producing region in the world.
Yeah.
In basketball terms for 40 years.
Yeah. Well, they're the tallest people in the world next to the Dutch. Yeah.
At one point, the Baltics were in that discussion, but and they still produce a lot of players, but I would say that the Slavic areas are better. And so it's not a surprise, I guess, that we're seeing so many of them once that pathway was legitimate. It's also not surprising that there are a lot of guys who are interested in it, because if you're, say, not a star, but a more marginal player, like maybe a rotation guy, which it seems like a lot of these guys are, that come over. We're not seeing a lot of guys that come over and they were averaging 23 points a night for their pro team over there. Almost certainly the NIL opportunities are such that you're making more here than there. And I'm sure part of their thought process is also, you're playing in the United States. I mean, I know the modern era, you can be seen anywhere, but let's be honest, it's a little easier if you're playing for North Carolina to be seen by pro scouts in this country than it is if you're playing for a pro team in Montenegro.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I don't think a whole lot of them are coming for the education, although, some of these schools, you're getting great educations for what it's with.
They're not playing school.
But you are getting some time living in the United States, and that's worth something as far as maybe, if you want to path to citizenship or somehow, emigrating or something like that. I mean,
did you just say that?
I did just say that.
A path to citizenship?
I mean,
in 2020. Okay.
President's not going to be the president forever. That's all I'll say.
That's true.
All right. So let's move on to the next player. Jaron Stevenson, 6'10" junior transfer from Alabama. And okay, so I wonder how anyone's left in the Slovakian area. How has anyone left at Alabama? I feel like every team has a transfer from Alabama at some point.
That's the magic of Nate Oates, right?
Right. Yeah, he's amazing. So Stevenson averages 8 points a game, 5 rebounds a game, shoots 42, 24, and 87.
Yeah.
6'7".
The thought has been that he's a stretch 6'10" guy. The 3-point shooting hasn't arrived just yet. But certainly gives them a lot of length. I would say that It's going to be an interesting match. I'm going to be interested to see which of the two, it won't be their center, but which of the two 6'10" guys that they start is going to guard Cohen Carr. That's interesting to me.
Yeah.
But Stevenson's he was a highly regarded recruit at Alabama. So this is a guy who was seen to have potential, and he's starting for Carolina, but thus far hasn't really had a breakthrough just yet.
So our other 6'10" player, a freshman from Atlanta, is Caleb Wilson. He's averaging 20.5 points a game, 10.3 rebounds a game, shooting 62, 40, and 76. And that's a decent volume. I'm sorry, not good. He's only a 2 of 5 from 3 this season.
Yeah.
Also 8 free throw attempts a game. So you can kind of get a feel for what his game is, mainly inside shooting and with the ability to hit outside, I suppose, if you let him have an open look.
Yeah, but he's more than just pure 3-point shooting. He can face you up. He can hit a mid-range shot on occasion. I think he had 10 free throw makes today. He was not efficient from the field, but he still ended up with 20 points. And this game against St. Bonaventure was considered a down game for him. He's been incredibly impressive. And when you're going to see it on Thursday, you only have to watch about 10 seconds. You'll understand why he's highly regarded. He looks the part. Every bit of 6'10". He's strong, but very athletic, skilled. Looks natural moving, looks natural handling the ball a bit. He's in the mix for best freshman in America. Now that's a stiff test this year.
Yeah, a lot of good players.
And the guy that I personally think is the best hasn't really even played much, Darren Peterson at Kansas. He's been hurt. Right. But even with him out of the mix, you've got tons of names. I mean, it's crazy. Somebody like Cam Ward for Michigan State, who in many seasons would be getting a decent amount of attention for what he's doing, a total afterthought.
Yeah.
Because there's so many guys that are putting up huge numbers, and this kid's among the best. I mean, I think you put him, you put Boozer, you put the kid at BYU, and then Peterson when he comes back. Those are probably the 4 best, but I'm sure people can reel off 4 or 5 others who deserve to be considered in that discussion. But he's something else. And he's a top guy. I mean, he's averaging 20 and 10.
Yeah, not bad
doing
for
it
freshman.
efficiently, right? So
Yeah.
what else is there to say? He's a load.
Yeah. Then the 7-footer you mentioned earlier, Henry Visar, he's a transfer from Arizona, and he's averaging 16.3 points a game, 8.7 rebounds a game, shooting 64, 42, and 72.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that Arizona could lose a guy like this and not miss a beat because they're really good.
Yeah.
They're one of the best teams in the country from what I can see right now. Vesar was a very important addition for Carolina. Again, this is a team that didn't even really have a true center last year. And that's very un-Carolina-like to not have any size. So you look at what they've done. They bring in a McDonald's All-American freshman at 6'10". They add another transfer at 6'10", and then a transfer at 7 feet. And they can all play. This guy is very good. He was actually their most productive player today rather than Wilson. But he's a tough matchup, man. I watching him in this game. St. Bonaventure had some decent size. You remember Frank Mitchell, the guy who played at Minnesota last year? Big wide body guy.
Yeah.
He's St. Bonaventure's center.
Oh, okay.
And that guy is big and he's physical.
Yeah.
And it did not matter. Vesar he's got the full array of offensive tools. He's going to be a very tough cover. He's got range, so you're going to have to he doesn't shoot a ton of threes, but you're going to have to honor him outside. I saw him hit a few hook shots that were very impressive. They weren't 2-footers either. There was a little bit of range involved, and he looks natural shooting it. And then he's a rebounder, and he gives him a defensive presence. So, there again, as with Wilson, not much to dislike. This kid can play.
Yeah, pretty interesting that all 5 of those starters are new to the team this year. Right?
Yeah, that's correct. That is correct. Yes. That's a good.
So let's move.
Well, you see what I mean about now Seth Trimble starts, instead of Stevenson if he's healthy.
Right.
So that would be one guy back. But yeah, at the moment, that's absolutely true.
So moving to the bench, we begin with Derek Dixon, 6'5" freshman, averaging 5.5 points a game on 40, 53, and 80 shooting. So he'll be, like you mentioned before, he'll be a backup point guard. He only has 6 assists to 4 turnovers for the season.
Yeah, is a freshman. So not an elite recruit, but a solid one.
Mm-hmm.
I've only seen them really today and a little bit of the Kansas game. I wasn't knocked out, but he's got good positional size. And, they're not asking him to handle a huge load. I think he plays about 14, 15 minutes a game. So,
yeah,
they just look to him basically to get by.
Then we have Jonathan Powell, 6'6" sophomore transfer from West Virginia, averaging 4 points a game on 29, 30, and 50 shooting. And most of his attempts are outside the arc.
Yeah, and people may remember his name. Jonathan Powell was a kid from Ohio that Michigan State was very high on and were recruiting him a couple of years ago. So this was in the class that we got who did it have been? We got Jace and Kurtang and Jesse McCulloch. And Powell was a guy that apparently really liked Michigan State. And then in the end, I think Michigan State I hate saying this stuff because it's what loser fan bases do with, it backed off. But it kind of did feel that Michigan State in the end backed off a little bit because let's be honest, who chooses West Virginia over Michigan State, right?
Right.
So I think that's kind of evident in that choice. But in looking at him, I'm just going back to his numbers from last year. So last year for West Virginia, he was a part-time starter. He started 23 games. He shot 38, 35, and 48 at the line. But the 35% was on high volume, almost 6 attempts a game.
That's pretty good.
So you look at what's going on this year, and it's a little bit south of that, right? So I would suggest that, and again, with 80% of his shots coming from 3, it tells you what he is offensively, right? He's basically a shooter.
Yeah.
A jump shooter. So I don't think it's crazy for Carolina to think, well, the shooting's going to come around. If he was a Michigan State player, we'd be saying the same thing. Say, hey, the numbers on high volume in a high major conference were quite a bit better than this. He'll come around. It hasn't worked thus far. I know when Michigan State was recruiting him, the thought was that he would be a good two-way wing. They thought he had good defensive potential too, besides what he could do offensively. I don't know how that's checked out thus far at Carolina. I haven't seen enough of him there. But that was the thought when he was being recruited, at least.
And finally, we have Zayden High, 6'10" sophomore, coming off the bench. She's averaging a little under 3 points a game and 3 rebounds a game, shooting 31, 33, and 71.
Yeah, so he's their big man reserve. Now, when you're starting 3 guys 6'10" or taller, you don't need a lot behind that. But he barely played last year, so he's consistently playing. He's averaging about 9 minutes a game. So, basically you can do the math. He's getting like a turn a half, basically.
Sure.
But, he's been okay. They think he's got some shooting ability. So in the long run, maybe he's a guy who develops into a stretch big. Other than that, you're looking at a guy who they're just going to ask to hold the fort down for a few minutes when he's out there and provide them some additional size.
So kind of a short rotation. I mean, of only 8 players right now for a team that with this tempo that they have and the way they play, pretty short bench. But I mean, Michigan State's played with 8 players before, primarily 8 and gotten by. I mean, this obviously doesn't mean there's no one else who show up for a few minutes. Like if something happens,
you can do it. And there are other guys, James Brown, who's yet another 6'10" guy, is a kid Michigan State recruited out of Chicagoland. And he went to Carolina and he's in his second year there, has not really turned the corner yet. They got a couple of other guys, but these are guys who haven't even played in all 6 games.
Yeah.
So you also have to remember when Trimble is healthy, it's a 9-man rotation, which
Right,
makes
yeah.
a little more sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would agree with you. I think at this point, my assumption would be this. If he truly comes back toward the end of next month, then that's okay, because that's the point the ACC kicks in. And
Right.
if I was Hubert Davis, I'd be saying, okay, the thing you're worried about with a shorter rotation and a team that plays fast is not the short term. You worry about late February,
Exactly.
right?
Wearing out the
If
legs
you
early. Yeah.
if you're able to go back to a 9-man rotation before, right as the ACC kicks in, that's probably okay. I wouldn't think that that's a major problem in terms of wearing guys out. But we'll see. You're right to, and I actually thought about that, and I thought, boy, do I think that depth is going to matter in this game? And the conclusion I reached is probably not. That's something I would look at again if we were in late February, early March, and they've been going a whole season with 8 guys. Then I might say, hey, last 5-6 minutes of this game, look out.
Yeah, but it's not like they're playing 7 or 6, because that makes that'd be even a bigger difference. So 8 is kind of like you said, it's kind of the edge.
But High doesn't play that much. He only plays, as I said, about 9 minutes a game.
True.
So it's really only 7 guys in double-digit minutes.
Yeah.
So they don't have anybody off that bench that's basic, that's going like 20, where you can say, that's almost a 6th starter.
Sure.
Like the 2 reserves who are in double digits are both like in the mid-teens. So,
all right. Well, I have a guess, but who do you have as Michigan State's player they need to keep in the gutter?
Well, it's a 2-man race, and look, Vesar is legit. Like today, he was their best player today, but you're crazy if you think I'm going to pick anybody else than Caleb Wilson. He's going to be the most talented guy on the floor, and that's no disrespect to anybody in green and white. He just is. He's going to be a lottery pick, and is a hell of a talent. And he's also, we talked some today in our post game about Jackson Kohler, the defensive improvements, all of that. Well, he's going to draw a lot of Caleb Wilson. So will Cam Ward. And those guys really need to be on it, because this is a guy who can hurt you in a lot of different ways. And physically, he's a tough matchup, and he's also a guy, as we talked about, gets to the line a lot. So he puts pressure on you defensively to defend him without committing fouls. And so that's going to be a challenge too.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see how it turns out for Michigan State. That brings us to the Who Cleans the Glass Best, brought to you by the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. Still time to get those windows cleaned, whether both the interior and exteriors, blinds, screens, whatever it might be. Also, they'll power wash your home. Still plenty of time to do that. And I would not want the job of being out in a raincoat on a ladder doing their gentle house washing that they do at this time of year. But that's why you pay these guys to do it for you. And they do a very nice job, and the nicest people. So you get 15% off. You mentioned Final Four when you get your estimate. Contact Troy and his team if you're anywhere within a spitting different distance of Grand Rapids. So head over to our support page at the Final Four is not the schedule.com/support to find the link to get a hold of Troy and his team. So I got lucky that you had Kohler with the first pick last game, and yet you didn't win. You got lucky in that you managed to scrape out a tie, so no one took advantage. So you're up still 3-2. I will get the first pick. I'm obviously going to go with Kohler because I still think you're crazy not to take Kohler.
I am going with Carson Cooper, obviously, as my first pick.
Right.
And then, as we say, the second pick is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a differentiator today, but it could easily be in this game between Cohen Carr and Cam Ward. I just got a feeling I'm going to go with Cam Ward.
Okay. Yeah, you can see Ward being out there playing more minutes because maybe some foul trouble with either Kohler or Cooper, and so he might get a little more of a turn. But I mean, you could also make the same case for McCullough. Not that I'm going to pick McCullough, but I'm going to go with Carr just because I think he's going to have an ability to stay on the floor a little bit more. He doesn't tend to foul a whole lot either, usually. So I mean, we'll just see. He seems to come in big games. He kind of shows up and it has big games. So that's my hope is that we get a little bit more from him, and we'll talk about that later too, as
I,
as we move on.
I just
Uh,
in defense, I don't know, you're not attacking me for it, but in defense of my Ward pick, the other thing,
mhm.
besides playing time potentially, which is a good point, uh, this just feels to me as if it's going to be a game where physicality is really important.
Yep.
Like you're going to need to send a message, same way as occurred against Arkansas and Kentucky, except
Yep.
I think Carolina is a little more physical than those teams. But I think they'll respond to it better. But in a physical game, I can't see Cam Ward not being really important.
Yeah, and the one that I see like about Michigan State, those four, and outside of McCullough, and I think McCullough will get there. I just don't think he's there right now. Is that the physical aspect? I think you feel comfortable all four of those guys mixing it up with anybody, and
Yep,
and
100%.
the only thing you say with against Carr is that he's a little undersized compared to those three. When you come to just rebounding, but he can make up for that a little bit with his
Oh,
athleticism. So
look, if Cohen sets his mind to it, absolutely.
yeah, right.
Absolutely, he could compete with that. But we haven't seen it happen consistently enough, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yep.
the only reason. But look, it would not be a shocker if Cohen Carr goes out in a 7-8 rebounds. Wouldn't surprise anybody.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. All right. So that brings us to nudge printing and 5 keys to the game. Nudgeprinting.com is a place to go for your Spartan apparel. You can head to nudgeprinting.com/win. There you can enter. Well, I guess the drawing will be over now that I think about it. We'll announce the winner during the North Carolina post game, and then we'll begin a new drawing for a new prize at Nudge Printing. So continue to remember it, keep in your mind, nudgeprinting.com/win. Head on over there. You can not only get our gear, if you like our logo gear, I'm not wearing one today, but you can have the Tiff Knotzing gear, either hoodies or stickers or t-shirts, whatever it might be, which are really sweet, super comfortable, great pricing. But you can get any of the other Spartan apparel too, of course, at Nudge Printing. And as a listener to the show, just enter the keyword TIFNOTS at TFFINOTS at checkout. It's a coupon code that gets you 20% off your order. You'll be glad you did. Do that now. Black Friday sale still through, well, I guess this week, at least the weekend, and get some great stuff for Christmas. Start loading up your gifts for all your friends. I don't think he has any North Carolina stuff. So if you're a North Carolina fan, sorry, you're out of luck. All right. So beginning with the first key of the game is rebounding. We mentioned North Carolina solid at both ends. Michigan State is elite at both ends. If you get someone has an edge here, obviously they're going to have an edge in the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. Now, the fact that Michigan State has a significant edge at both ends on the boards does not mean that Carolina is incapable of making it a draw or even out rebounding Michigan State. With their size and their physicality, MSU has to come to play. And I think we've been, since the regular season started, we've had reason to feel very, very good about MSU and its willingness and ability to compete on the glass. But this is another challenge. Just like Kentucky was a challenge, just like Arkansas was a challenge, you are going to have to bring it for 40 minutes. And you need to do that because, as we said, each of these teams has some strengths compared to the other.
Right.
And they might only be sort of marginal differences, but they're there, and you need to take advantage of the ones you have. And for Michigan State, I think they need to carve out an advantage on the glass, both ends.
And the second key to the game is the transition. Both teams like to do this. Again, it's like talking about Michigan State playing itself in practice or something. They both move, try and get a lot of easy buckets. So that kind of coincides with rebounding. You either get offensive rebounding to slow down the transition the other way, or you have to clear the defensive boards in order to get your transition game going.
Yeah, I would say this. Carolina is really good in transition, and of course, it's a program staple. They do it the same way that you would always say that about Michigan State, right? But we know from watching Michigan State over the years, there are years where Michigan State is better than others in terms of their ability. Right now, if they play, and I know Izzo was down on the transition game on the Kentucky and UAD games.
Yeah.
But I think that when I watch Carolina, I don't think Carolina is quite as good in transition as MSU. And the main, I say that for two main reasons. One is the point guard. They got a good point guard, Ian Jeremy Fears.
Uh-huh.
And he's not Jeremy Fears in terms of the break. He's, just imagine if we were talking about a first-year guy in Michigan State system at the point. We are. Divine Ugachukwu is adjusting to that, right? Yeah. And so you don't expect it unless it's a really, really rare situation for a first-year guy to be quite that good.
Yeah.
The other thing is I think Michigan State has finishers that North Carolina doesn't. Look, Wilson's a hell of a player. And he's a guy who can hurt you in transition, no question. And their big guys can run the floor. I don't mean to suggest that they're, lumbering oafs or anything. But there is no Cohen Carr.
Right.
You remember this, I'm sure. We were in Madison Square Garden, and directly behind us was a Carolina fan.
Yeah.
And we were talking about, the upcoming game. He could not stop raving about Cohen Carr. And I said, well, you guys have had a few of those over the years.
Yeah, no kidding.
Jordan, Vince Carter, Jerry Stackhouse. And he said, yeah, but he was, for whatever that's worth, an opposing fan of this team had that reaction to Cohen Carr. And I think we saw today, too, what Trey Fort can add. And we've been kind of waiting for that. And I think he had his moment.
I'd forgotten, actually.
Yeah, right. Because he hasn't been as involved.
Yeah, right.
So I was really, really, really impressed with what he showed athletically today. Yeah. So the other thing too is, for as mobile as Carolina's bigs are, and they are, is there anybody they've got? Are there five men going to outrun Carson Cooper? Probably not. So I would give, even though it's something Carolina does too, it's as much part of their DNA as it is Michigan State's. I just feel that these two teams, MSU's got a little more horsepower if they're humming than Carolina does. We'll see if I'm right.
All right, so that brings us to the third key to the game, which is fouling. I think it's kind of obvious with all the North Carolina has in the front court that it is a risk. If you suddenly lose Jackson Kohler or Carson Cooper for significant periods of time to foul trouble, that could be a real problem. And then this is where North Carolina makes some hay too at the foul line.
Yeah, this is an area where you would look at the stats and you would say Carolina has an edge. Now, MSU's been pretty good up until the second half today at defending without fouling excessively. So that has been something of a strength. But Carolina gets to the line a lot. And when you watch them, you understand why. It's all that size. They're also trying to play fast. They look to put pressure on you, and particularly Wilson, but he's not alone. They got some other guys too that'll do that. At the other end, Michigan State started the year, I think, in great shape, drawing fouls.
Right.
Last 3 games or so, not as much. And they've slipped out of the top 100. And so on paper, at least, it shapes up as a game where you could imagine Carolina having a little bit of an edge there. A little edge is not the end of the world. It can't be a big edge.
Right.
That's what I'm concerned about.
All right. So the fourth key to the game are the bigs. So we talked already. They got Wilson and Vassar, and Michigan State's got to play well against those guys, because that's where North Carolina gets most of the business done.
Well, look, it's important to note, we're not talking about just limiting those guys or making them inefficient. You're not going to shut them down, most likely, but
right, yeah.
What you hope for is that you make them inefficient. It's also about putting pressure on them at the other end. So that means Jackson Kohler, Carson Cooper, Cam Ward, Jesse McCulloch have to be active and efficient offensively as well. And you got to work on the glass, as we already talked about. You really have to counter them. You would definitely say that North Carolina has the edge in terms of its front court, just in totality.
Sure.
They've got 2 guys that are scoring more than any of the Michigan State bigs.
Right.
But I think Michigan State's 4-man group is a little deeper. I like Ward and McCulloch a little better than I like, say, Stevenson and High, the kid that plays off
Sure.
Carolina's bench. So that maybe matters. You got maybe more reliable bodies that you can use, but you don't need to outplay their big guys. You need to just, as best as you can, not quite play them to a standstill, at least play a representatively good game. And look, we're not asking for the world, because let's be honest, Jackson Kohler has been tremendous this season. North Carolina's got to worry about Jackson Kohler, and they got to worry about Carson Cooper too.
Sure.
You know, I didn't see St. Bonaventure was not a team that was going to test Carolina, say, with rim dives off pick and rolls. I want to see that. I want to see how Vassar is in holding up to what Michigan State does with Fears and Cooper in that part of the game. So it's a doable thing, but it has to happen, because if that does happen and Michigan State's bigs really do hang in there with Carolina's, then it becomes a backcourt game, and I take Michigan State's backcourt all day over Carolina's.
And then, so you mentioned earlier, it'd be interesting to see how Carolina's able to defend against Carr. I mean, they'll have size on him in the defensive end, but that goes the other way too. Like Carr's got to defend a guy 6'10". Now we've seen him play the 4 and hold his own, but that's gonna be a tall order for him as well. No pun intended.
I think he can handle it, and I think the reason he can handle it.
So is he going to be having Wilson, do you think, or is he going to be handling?
Yeah, that's a good
Stevenson?
question.
Because Jackson,
think,
you want to get Jackson in foul trouble either, right? I mean,
you don't want Carr in foul trouble.
Well, that's true.
It goes both ways. I would think this. I would imagine that they probably put Carr on Stevenson, because Stevenson is not. I think Wilson's a guy that they could say, "Hey, take this guy to the blocks and go to work and try to use your size advantage." And they might get some work done against Cohen, more so than they would against Jackson, let's say.
Yeah.
Stevenson, I don't think, is that player. So I think he's an easier cover that way for Cohen. That's my guess, but we'll see.
And the fifth and final key to the game is Carr, and that's with 2 R's.
Yeah, look, I mean, we were just talking about him, right? I do think in high-level games, and I always say this in NCAA tournament games, but it applies anytime you're playing another very good team.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing here. Sometimes the difference is if you've got a guy who can make that 95th percentile play, meaning on a floor filled with good players, he's a guy who can go above and beyond everybody else to make big plays. That can be, I'll give you an example. You know who did a ton of that in an NCAA tournament game was B.J. Dawson.
Right, yeah.
Game against Virginia. He just went out, and on a floor filled with great players, he got rebounds in traffic above everybody, just because he was tougher and a better athlete than everybody else. He had that, had that extra horsepower that nobody else on that court could match. And I think Cohen Carr is an obvious. Now, Carolina has one too in Wilson, but I think Cohen Carr is the guy for Michigan State that has that ability. There, we see it almost every game. We see a moment or two at least, right?
Yeah, right.
Where he just goes and does something that nobody else on that floor is capable of doing. And it doesn't have to be a dunk even. It often is, but it doesn't have to be. I think in a high-level game, you want to have that guy go out and truly dominate and make those kind of plays in big moments, kind of separate himself from everybody else on the court, and you win the game because you got him and the other guys don't.
Yeah, we've talked about it.
Talking about.
Yeah, well, we've talked about it this season so far, and I think it's probably worth pointing out. Carr is so far from his ceiling from what we've seen.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's scratched it. We've seen bits and pieces, flashes, like you said, but we've all seen points even like last year where he would sort of semi-dominate like a half, like that Mississippi game in the NCAA tournament or Bryant game. I think even Bryant game, he was really good too.
Yep.
It's there. And like the scariest thing for an opponent has to be if this guy figures it out to do it for an entire game. I mean, like, I can't even imagine what that would be like if he starts like being all of what he can be. And that's what we're hoping to unlock this year. That, I mean, if that happens this year, then who knows where this team goes.
I think we saw some signs of it in that second half today. Now it's one
Yep.
half of basketball.
Right.
He needs to do that for 40 minutes. But when he is attacking, when he is playing downhill, getting the ball on the perimeter and just come hell or high water, he's going to get to the rim. That's what we're talking about, because he can finish in traffic, he can finish through contact, and he can create foul trouble. You know, we say, well, North Carolina's done a great job of defending without fouling. Absolutely true. North Carolina has also not faced anybody remotely like Cohen Carr. So he is the guy. He and Fears are the two guys that I look at who could maybe change that equation a little bit and force Carolina into fouling more than they typically do. But Cohen's the guy, I think, again, just because that horsepower he's got athletically is such a high level that you just kind of feel if they're going to get over the hump in big games against other really good teams. And I do think Carolina is a good team this year. I'm not sure how good yet, but based on what I've seen so far, I think they're probably that next tier down from Duke in the ACC. And I certainly see them as a second weekend threat. Any team that has somebody as good as Wilson and Vesser has a chance to do that. But if you're going to win those kind of games, you need guys like Cohen Carr to step up and just take over in certain moments.
Right.
So that's what I'm looking for and hoping to see.
Yeah, I think I think unquestionably they're one of the top three teams in the ACC. I mean,
yeah, with Louisville, that'd be the other team.
I think those are the pretty obvious. So, you know, Carson Cooper, I think, was talking about after, was it at what game was it at? I think they were 3-0. And I think it was a Kentucky game. He said, I've never been on a team that was 3-0 in his college career, which is interesting. Like, you know, for as good as Michigan State's season was last year, they lost pretty early when they lost to Kansas.
Lost twice. Lost to Kansas and they lost to Memphis.
Right, exactly. And, you know, we saw where they ended up.
Yep.
This team's all 6-0. I think, you know, we don't go through the games of the year. We don't look ahead. We look ahead, but we don't like go through the games of which ones you can win, lose. But I think, you know, we looked at the pre-Big Ten season. There's Duke, North Carolina, Arkansas, Kentucky, the four big games that they got. Mm-hmm. I think we said earlier that if they split them, that'd be okay. And that's, you know, what we kind of hope for at least. You would at least protect home court. You take the Arkansas and say Duke game, for instance, and, you know, if you lose neutral court games. But right now they've got two, so it's not they're playing with house money, but sort of. If they were to pull off this one, and then, you know, then you've got Duke and Iowa, and then pretty much presumably you coast into the Big Ten start of the season really in January. Miss an opportunity for this team if they get this game, it's hard. There's a lot they could do. I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine where they could end up anywhere is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Well, you know, I'll say this, you don't want to get ahead of yourself, but
right. We've
talked about it. We talked about it earlier today when we were talking about the East Carolina game. It is rare that you see a Michigan State team this connected this early in the season. I would say, and I don't think I'm being hyperbolic, the last time we saw this, it was a very different kind of team, was the 2015-16 team. Denzel Valentine, Bryn Forbes, Matt Costello. Mm-hmm. That team got out of the chute hot, stayed that way really until Denzel got hurt. And then they went through a little bit of a lull without him. And when he first came back, they were still trying to get through that. And then, of course, they found themselves, I think, were the best team in the country at the end of the regular season. And that inexplicable Middle Tennessee game ruined what had been one of the great seasons in Izzo's tenure, in my opinion. It's the last time I saw a Michigan State team at this point in the season look this connected, this mature. Now, we are very used to saying, hey, November is November, but let's see what it looks like in March. It's going to be a lot better than this. And more often than not, that's the case, right?
Right.
Is that going to be the case with this team? Do they, we can look at it and we could probably both cite 50 ways they could still get a lot better. We just got done talking about Cohen Carr.
Right.
Right.
For one instance. Yeah. One example.
Kind of unlocks more consistency. Trey Fort kind of gets more comfortable offensively and starts becoming a legit scoring presence. You continue to see, maybe you see offensive improvements from Jordan Scott.
Exactly.
Divine keeps up what he showed against East Carolina, on and on and on we go. We can imagine those ways that Michigan State can get better. If they take it up a notch and shoot a little more consistently from three, they're better. But that's going to be the question with this team is, okay, they're at a pretty good level for November, but we all know you don't win anything in November. So can they keep getting better from here the way we're used to seeing? Because if they do that, that means the arrival point come March is really good, really good. And, based on what we've seen, is there anything really not to like with this team? I don't think there is. They're so connected defensively. They all have a high level of give a shit, the effort level, the energy, the intensity, all there. We have not seen that dip since the regular season started. That's a great sign. That's a great, great sign. And so you just have to hope that stays intact and you just continue to get better each day. Get that, it used to be something D'Antonio talked about, right? That it's a game of inches. You're just trying to get that extra inch every day. That's where this team is, because the way they've played to date, there are not like massive leaps that need to happen for this team to be right in the mix. I mean, I've seen Purdue at full strength, really good, every bit as good as I thought they'd be. On a neutral court or facing an NCAA tournament gauntlet, if I'm looking at Michigan State versus that team right now, I'm still taking Purdue, but isn't as big a gap as it was in my mind in October. I'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where they are now. But as we know, this is a long journey. And where do you go from here? Can you maintain the good and improve the things that aren't as good? That's what's going to determine where this team goes. But right now, if you're Michigan State, you have to feel really good about the work you've done. And the part that I like is I get the sense with this group that there's zero satisfaction with any of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what I like so much about this team too, and this goes for last year as well, the team makes sense. Like, you don't have parts that are like, you're kind of like pigeonholing, or you're not pigeonholing, but you're like forcing someone to a position or to a role that doesn't quite fit for them.
100%.
And you could almost argue last year was a little bit that way, with trying to figure out like your go-to guy until Jay sort of emerged. Like,
yes,
is Jay the guy who's going to, and maybe you could argue that they don't really have that, although they have, I think that with Jeremy just being the ability to just sort of create opportunities for players, I think you don't need it as much, that like the guy just can go get his own on his own.
Absolutely right. People obsess about go-to guy, right?
Yeah.
But part of the deal last year with that team was, although Jeremy was a big part of it, it wasn't like it is now. Whereas it's his team. It wasn't that way, Now you have that catalyst. And we have been fortunate enough thus far to have not experienced many tight games to date. Arkansas was it, right?
Yeah. Well, that's true. Yeah.
And they made the plays they needed to win that game. So we haven't seen it tested yet. My theory as of right now is exactly where you went, though. No, they do not have somebody scoring 20 a night. Right now, any given day, is it Jax, Cohen,
Divine?
Those would be your two most likely. But on a given day, Jeremy or Carson could be that guy. Somebody off the bench could have a big game. Trey Ford or Curtain, we've seen them go off in big games against good opponents, So it could be anybody, but they don't have to have that one guy scoring 20 a night because they have somebody who in a big moment can find anybody, can create a play for anybody. That is what makes you truly dangerous as a team, in my opinion. If I've got to have it one way or the other, that's like, for example, to go to the pros. What has made the Pistons, in my opinion, so good so far this year is that they not only have that go-to scorer in Cade Cunningham, who's becoming an elite scorer, but he's also an elite creator. It doesn't have to be him taking that shot. He can make a play for somebody else. Jeremy's a different kind of player in pretty much every way, but it is that same thing. I would also, right now, with the way he's played, if Jeremy Fears decides the best shot is him taking a jumper with a game on the line, I'll ride with it.
Yeah, well, I absolutely.
Right now, why not? I trust his decision-making.
Yeah, no, I think so too. All right. So, like I said, we're going to be here live after the game. Make sure you enter get involved in the poll. Make sure you come in. You can watch us either X or Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, of course. Also, we have just about a week to go. December 2nd is the deadline for the Beat Rod contest. So if you think you can make a better prediction on the final standings of the Big Ten, 1 through 18, send in your prediction to me for free, Eric, that's ERIC, at tffinots.com. 1 through 18, make sure you have your name. Also put in the number of points Michigan State will score against Michigan this season. They played twice. And after watching a lot of Big Ten, I haven't watched all the Big Ten teams, most of them, the Big Ten looks really tough. I mean, I think we're talking before we went on. I mean, I think right now Dom has the Big 12 as better than the Big Ten simply because Houston and Arizona at the time were both, top 5 teams. Top. And I wonder now if he's going to rethink that. Certainly the bottom of the Big Ten are maybe pretty bad, but I don't know. I don't look at the metrics like he does too. So, and it's still pretty early since there's not a ton of data with only 7-8 games in.
So here's my thought. I think that the bottom of the Big Ten is awful.
Yeah, they're really bad.
Rutgers is
they're rough.
Bad news. And
they're worse than I think you thought they're going to be.
We haven't talked about it all here, but I'm beginning to wonder about Pikel because
I agree.
It's gotten on a bad trajectory, and that program has very little support financially. And the roster looks like it, and it's bad. Minnesota's starting over. I think they got a coach that could get it done. I think Niko Medved was a good hire that made sense, but he doesn't have it this year.
Yeah,
and
right.
Penn State, unfortunately, after a couple of years, the first 2 years under Mike Rhodes, where I thought they're pretty competitive, it looks like it's a serious step back.
Yeah.
So you got a bad bottom end. But good Lord, everything after that. Now, I'm not saying we're putting 15 teams in the tournament, but you look around. So everybody in the preseason talked about Purdue and Michigan. Well, Purdue has looked great. Michigan had not looked great. 2 consecutive nights, they've got huge blowout wins in this cash grab thing they're playing in.
Yeah,
it looks like they're gonna match up against either Tennessee or Gonzaga tomorrow. That will be a stiff test. They handle either one of those teams, then I got to say, all right, they may have found it, because they had some wins that were not impressive at all. They didn't really even deserve to beat Wake Forest or TCU. But nevertheless, you got to say the overall resume, they're not like markedly different than the way they were perceived. Illinois, good win over Texas Tech. They lost to Alabama and Chicago. That wasn't so good, but still, that's a good team. Indiana, I think, offensively, extremely impressive. We'll see when they get in the Big Ten if they can match up defensively and size-wise. But that team, I think, looks a shade better than people thought they would. Iowa, they haven't really played anybody yet. I think they're playing somebody tonight.
They're playing Mississippi right now. As we're recording it, second half, they're up 2.
Okay.
They're somewhere.
Mississippi's a solid team.
Somewhere.
Chris
Yeah.
Beard. I mean, we saw them in the tournament last year. That would be a good win. Looks to me like McCollum is doing exactly what we figured he would do. He's making them very competitive right away.
Yep.
Oregon, UCLA. These aren't flawless teams,
No,
but when
USC's,
you're talking
yeah.
about a collection of teams, this is going to be a gauntlet.
Yeah.
An absolute gauntlet. And right now, I don't think you could say there's a top 3 that's done more than Purdue, Michigan State, Michigan, which right now to me are the 3 best teams on the evidence we have in the Big Ten, subject to change. Houston is not the Houston I'm telling you. They should have lost 2 games before today. Today they did lose to Tennessee. They're not an elite team right now offensively. They're just not. Arizona's really good. That might be it for the Big 12. Kansas is not the Kansas you're used to.
And BYU
is not yet. We'll see when Peterson gets healthy, but they're not that right now. And Iowa State's good, but are they at the level of the best teams in the Big Ten? I don't think so. Not yet, at least. So to me, the top of the Big Ten is better than anybody else. And I think the depth of the Big Ten is better. From what I've seen of the SEC, put it on ice. They're not as good as the Big Ten. Bottom line.
Yeah.
Might not be as good as the Big 12 either. I mean, we saw Arkansas. I thought Arkansas is all right, but they've had some shaky moments in games other than Michigan State. We saw Kentucky. Maybe not great. Auburn today was an absolute disaster train wreck against Michigan. Awful basketball team. Alabama, okay. They're not as good as they've been. So you go down the line, that league's down to me. So I'm with you. I think the Big Ten is right there with anybody.
Makes you wonder too about the ACC if maybe they're the 3rd best conference. Like I don't have any feel for
they're better than they've been the last few years. I think that's true.
Yeah.
I'm not.
I have no idea middle of.
I'm not 100% sold on Louisville or NC State, but they're tournament teams for sure. Carolina, I think, is good. I think they're legitimately improved, and Duke is really good. Yeah. So we're gonna see. But for right now, I'm with you. I think the Big Ten is going to be an absolute war, and I think there's a chance that my view coming into the season was it's Purdue and then it's everybody else, kind of like it was for Michigan State last year, where it wouldn't have surprised me. Oh, there's like a 3-game, or Purdue the 2 years before that. That's a 3-game gap or so, right?
Right.
I don't know that I believe that now. And it's not anything to do with Purdue, because I think Purdue is more or less what I thought they'd be. It's that there are some teams that are just a lot better. And even those teams that we were talking about a minute ago might not be great, but they're good enough that, hey, you can imagine on a cold February night in Iowa City, Purdue rolls. I don't even know if they play at Iowa City this year, but you get my point. Purdue rolls in and gets beat by 3. You can see it. It's the way it used to be and the way it regularly was in the Big Ten forever and ever and ever, where, in the old 10-team league, where you could be playing the team in 6th or 7th as the front runner and get tagged.
Yeah. Well, it might happen again this year. Well, that's why we be here. And the great thing about, if you're a regular listener to the show, of course, we talk and you can follow along as the Michigan State team evolves throughout the season, and we sort of go through things. So, all right, well, we'll leave it there. We'll meet everyone. Hopefully you have a safe travels and Thanksgiving if you're going anywhere, or you have successful turkey cooking or whatever it is that you make for Thanksgiving, and you have a good time with your family. But we'll be here live after the North Carolina game soon afterwards when I get all the things straight together, usually within about half an hour. So make sure you join us then. And so until then, the Final Four is now on the schedule. Go Green.